Welcome to the HawkCast with your host, AJ Hawk.
Dan Orlovsky. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. So I obviously have played against you, known about you forever. We were a clip I came across recently was the Walter Camp Awards back in the day in college. You remember those awards?
Many years ago, yeah, man. I mean, I'm obviously being from Connecticut, there was a relatively decently big deal, and to get a bunch of All-Americans like yourself to come into our state was pretty cool. So, long time ago.
Yeah, it was awesome. The main thing I remember from that was just, they still do those awards, correct?
Yeah, no, they're still going strong and still getting good participation from a bunch of All-Americans and stuff, so they're still going.
I don't know what it's like now, but man, it was awesome back then. I had a great time. I came in, was like a junior in college maybe, and just had a blast. It was freezing cold. I didn't mind. I'm from Ohio, and just, man, we went out around the area there, and they had like guys that host you and get to hang out with all the players. It was fun, man. I hope it's still like that for those guys. Yeah,
they still do a good job of it. I mean, the thing is, it's like Connecticut is such a small state that when things that, garner national attention come to the state, it's like a huge deal because, especially sports-wise, it's not like a sports-rich state, So when you get All-Americans to come in and whatnot, it's a huge deal. So they don't really spare any expense. So it's still going strong, man.
That's good. So you played, obviously, big-time quarterback in Connecticut in high school. What's the high school football like there?
Really, really pedestrian. It's like, yeah, there's some pockets that are okay. You could get, 5 or 6 guys that'll go to play, relatively big college football a year, but it's not super competitive. Like lacrosse is the biggest sport there, or hockey with all the private schools. There's so much money in that area, that football isn't, there's just not a lot of big time athletes in the area.
So you went to UConn, where would you have gone if you didn't go there?
Well, I was originally committed to Michigan State, and you'll remember him because you're around my age. I think it was my junior year, a dude named Jeff Smoker started balling as a freshman for Michigan State.
Yeah, I was a big fan of his, yeah.
Yeah, he was a true freshman balling, so I was like, well, I'm not going to go there and because I wanted to play early, and then I took a visit to Purdue, and I was like, shoot, I love Purdue. Breeze was my host, and I got back, and I was calling – I forget, I had a huge test or something on Monday, so I was going to call Purdue on Tuesday and commit. Kyle Orton committed on Monday, and Orton was like a top 5 ranked high school quarterback. So I was like, hey, not going to go there. And then I took a visit to Virginia. Matt Schaub was my host. Jeez. Like Virginia, but I went into the meeting. You go to your final day of your visits, you go have a meeting with the head coach. George Welsh was the head coach. He kept calling me Matt, not Dan. So I was like, well, I'm not going to go there. So I ended up going to UConn. I probably would have gone to Virginia if George Welsh had just called me Dan one time.
Did you ever think about correcting him?
Well, I know, I was a little bit of a reserved team. I had a little punk to me, especially when it came to football and ignorance. But I was still like, okay, I don't want to offend you type. I'm the kid from Connecticut. Please give me a scholarship. So,
yeah, man, it's funny how that works out. I think I've read that when Steph Curry was a free agent shopping his shoe deal, that Nike put on a big presentation, Under Armour, and I guess the Nike guy was calling Stefan or Steven or something, just completely butchered it and lost out on having the NBA MVP be a Nike kid.
Yeah, same exact story. Nike lost on Steph Curry and Virginia lost on me.
Yeah, Under Armour swipes him up in a couple $100 million contract most likely, and who knows how many Steph Curry Under Armour shoes have been sold since then. I wish Steph would have made it to Nike because Nike makes much better basketball shoes, although I'm not playing a whole lot of pickup hoops, I guess. Did you play any other sports in high school?
Yeah, I played baseball. I was a better baseball player than I was football player, but I wasn't really athletic enough to play basketball, and so I played baseball, was pretty good at baseball, I always was, and then, it got to post-sophomore year, and recruiting was starting to pick up a little bit more in football. My dad played football in high school, so he was a little bit more leaning towards the football world, and he was like, you have to make a decision, one or the other, and I just flipped a coin because I liked both, and thought I would be okay at both and whatnot. So I flipped a coin. If it landed on this, I was going to play football, and on this, I was going to play baseball. But I was a pretty good baseball player. Pitched and played shortstop.
Would you have been a pitcher in college?
Yeah, I was for sure. I could throw it pretty good. I was an okay hitter. I was a better hitter in Little League than I was in high school, but I definitely would have pitched and probably played something in the outfield.
I mean, look at Jeff Samardzija, the classic example of he played both, I guess, while he was at Notre Dame, receiver and pitcher, and he's still pitching in the majors and doing with signing huge contracts. I mean, I guess it's a prime example. If you can pitch, if you can be a mediocre pitcher, I guess go to the majors, man. If you're not going to be a top 10 NFL pick, he wouldn't. I doubt he'd still be playing football now with 12 years later.
No, you know what? I saw Smarge's name like 2 weeks ago come across. Maybe it was Twitter or something like that, and they asked him. I think someone asked him, like, do you ever think about playing football? And he goes, well, I'm on the third year of a $140 million deal or something like that, and I've got buddies. I just can't imagine if I had chose football where I would be and whatnot. So, yeah, man, I mean, if you could do it, baseball over football, especially if you're an arm talent, no doubt.
Yeah, guaranteed. That's a guaranteed contract he's talking about too.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. You can go be over for the rest of your career and you'll still get your money.
You can get cut and be out of the league for 2.5 years and still be getting monster checks sent to your door.
Bobby Bonilla.
Yeah, didn't he? He has like a deferred. Didn't he get part of his contract deferred so he gets paid for the next 20 years?
Yeah, I think he signed like a 30-year, $30 million deal back in the day, so he gets like $1 million a year or something.
Have you ever heard anyone in the NFL doing that? Is that in the CBA? Can you defer part of your salary later on down the road?
I don't know, because I'm assuming our salary cap and floor and whatnot are different than in Major League Baseball. But if there is, I mean, it's certainly something entertaining. I think that NFL contracts are so jacked up that they need to, shrink the size of the contract and guarantee them all. I know it changes, it's such an injury-riddled sport and you got to keep competitiveness high, but I just think the guys who are signing the 5-year, $120 million, you're never going to see the last year and a half, 2 years of that deal. So it's like, what's the point of it?
Yeah, so right now we're recording this. It's March 9th, and we're seeing right now this is the time of year when you see cap casualties, like really, really good players getting cut because they're on the last year of a big contract and their cap number is just too high, so teams will let them roll. Yeah,
and it hurts the player and it hurts the team. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I understand why teams do it for the financial reasons, but it's unfair to the teams that make that decision 2 or 3 years previous to sign that player, and they still like him, but we just can't fit him into that number. It just makes no sense to me. Like, if we're still trying to create the best 53-man teams and the best products, then why do teams have to cut good players just because of a number?
Yeah, so you obviously played for multiple different teams. I'm curious about different coaches you played for. If you had to pick one coach of all the head coaches you played for, could you narrow down to one that you feel like gave you or gave the team the best chance to win?
Gary Kubiak. Hands down.
What did he do? What's different about him?
Dude, Kubiak just had this way. I mean, taking just my personal experience away from it, he had this way about him where, you've been in Saturday night meetings before an NFL game. You're still a long time before you play your game, and you're not really that fired up. I mean, you want to get done with meetings and go have a snack and ice cream and go. And, like, Kubiak would just have this way of, demanding the most out of you, but asking you for nothing. If that makes sense. Like, he just had this way in Saturday night meetings where he would demand everything that you had in the next day, but he wouldn't ask you for anything. And you would walk out of those meetings almost like you were back in college football. Like, I'll go do anything right now. I'll go run through the wall, whatever the cliche term is. And it was just so much fun. He just made it so much fun. There was just so many moments where football was fun. And in the NFL, sometimes football it's not that much fun anymore. There's the losing or the grind or the politics take away from the fun. And with Coach Kubiak, he just made it fun. He had such high standards for the team. It was literally like you were playing high school football or college football game with your buddies.
How was he able to do that and be that demand like excellence out of you, but also make it fun? There's a lot of coaches that will demand a lot from their team, but it's usually just a grind, and players day to day are not having a whole lot of fun.
I think that, one, he set the standard of the expectation level early really high, and then he was he was notorious for throwing us bones, like, but worthy bones, and we'd be in camp and he would, we'd be in, I don't know if it was a fourth day in a row or seventh day in a row or ninth day in a row, it would vary. And he would be like, hey, after practice, I've got, barbecue coming, over to the parking lot for you guys and just hang out. And we've got Gatorades and waters and barbecue for you guys. Night meetings are off. And when you got that from your coach, it was just like this, like it grabbed you. You knew that those sporadic bones were so awesome and you looked forward to them. It was just those little things. And I know coaches do stuff like that. It's almost like what Pete Carroll does with his team sometimes. And he never belittled you. Like it was more like this expectation and praise rather than, belittling or condescending out of him. It was just this demand that I think you can get to here, and let's try to find a way to get there.
Was he one of the guys that would put on the film, like say you play a game Sunday, Monday morning you come in, win or lose, would he show like the lowlights and highlights, or was he one of those guys?
He didn't do a ton of like team meeting film. I've had coaches like that, and he didn't do a ton of team meeting film. He was more like, guys, this is what we did well, this is what we didn't do well, and broke it down to a really simple understanding or a simple way for us as players to understand, okay, like, man, we didn't run the ball worth a jack yesterday and that's why we lost, or we threw 2 picks and that's why we lost and whatnot, and how to figure out. And he was always, it's almost like parenting. He was always very real and very honest, but always very encouraging and very optimistic about, where we were going.
Now was he Elway's backup?
Yeah. Yeah, he had some great stories of Elway, like, how Elway was struggling to learn the playbook, so Kubiak would be on the sideline, and they developed their own sign language of plays and how to communicate the plays and whatnot. It was really cool.
Really, what is that with? It seems like a lot of times quarterbacks that were primarily a backup in the league or wherever they played, it seems like they make the best coaches. Why is that guy a lot better coach, it seems like, than the Hall of Famers?
Yeah, so I'm kind of going through that a little bit myself right now, and you can attest to this. You played a bunch. I didn't play that much. So when you're studying and you're preparing as a guy, is playing every down, week in and week out, you're taking that information in during the week, and then you're just going to execute. You prepare and you execute, and you prepare and you execute. Well, for me, it was prepare and communicate and prepare and communicate. And I had to go take all that information that I was preparing, and just as for a guy like Matthew Stafford, I was studying and preparing just as much as he did, but also helping him to prepare and study. So I was doing a little bit more. And then I had to go take all that information and communicate it to the third string running back, who's as dumb as a brick, but the third string receiver who's bright, and so you have to take all these different kinds of people who can learn different ways and understand different ways and try to communicate it in different ways. And you learn different ways of communicating and teaching and analogizing and whatnot. And I think that's the cool thing about being the backup is you just learn, you intake and communicate and intake and communicate. And I think a lot of coaching comes into that. And even, in the world of media and broadcasting, it's the same way. You're intaking and communicating to a bunch of different people.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I've never heard it, I guess, laid out like that. But you're right. You have to find different ways to communicate this to people. Like you said, the third string running back who may be dumb as a brick, and another guy who's very bright. You got to learn on how can I present this information to this guy to where he understands what I'm saying. I'm not just speaking over his head.
Yeah, and the backup quarterback too. I mean, you have to bring. I mean, there's 16 games in a season, and you hope as for your team, the quarterback never has to play. So you better find ways to bring value to your locker room and your team in different ways other than that. So you've got to be able to mix in with the young crowd and then the veteran crowd, and you've got to be able to mix in with the kids that are the country boys and the kids that are from a little bit more of the city areas and whatnot. So you just have to have all these different kind of character traits and personality traits, and you've got to be able to just mix with a lot of different people and whatnot, so you bring value to your locker room.
Was there anyone that when you first got in the league, that you kind of learned that from? Because you're coming from being the stud at UConn, and now you're not going to take a whole lot of snaps early on. Did someone show you the way, or did you just kind of find that?
I think I learned from a lot of different people, good and bad. When I was young, I was with Joey Harrington, and I don't think that was necessarily a great strength of Joey's, and I'm not trying to knock Joey. It just wasn't a strength of his. But then I learned from a guy like Jeff Garcia, who did have a little bit of that camaraderie strength to him and used it to his strength. And then, Coach Kubiak was a guy I learned from. John Kitna was a guy I learned from. Matt Schaub was great at it. Matthew Stafford's great at it, and then there was guys that I just you could watch them and go, hey, Josh Freeman in Tampa was a guy that I felt struggled with it, and it kind of held him back, and it really was a kind of a part of his downfall type thing. So I think I was just, picking from a lot of different guys, good and bad. Okay, if I was the starter, how would I have handled that, or how can I learn from that and whatnot? And I think you try to learn from everybody, all those experiences.
Do the guys that struggle with it, does it seem that they're unhappy being the backup, and it's pretty obvious that they're unhappy and they feel like they should be the starter?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. That's why there's not a lot of guys in the backup role that play a long time, and that's why the guys who can do it do play for a long time, because it's such a unique skill set. I mean, I have to work and prepare just as hard as the other 52 guys on the team, but the other 52 guys are going to play. I mean, they know that they're going to get snaps. I don't. And so, it's as the backup, you have to be patiently impatient. You have to be impatient with your work and your preparation, your study habits, and how you're practicing and post-practice. But then you have to be patient because your job is the backup. And, for me, the biggest thing was when Matthew Stafford or Matt Schaub or even Mike Glennon when he was young, when I sat in meeting rooms with those guys, that those guys knew I was there for one reason, and that was to help them. I wasn't there to take their job. I wasn't there to, go badmouth them. I had their back no matter what, whether I agreed with what happened on that play or this game, or that I had their back and that they could say anything to me, that we had a comfort level, a respect level. I was going to be honest with them. And, that was my main focus. And I think that a lot of guys struggle with that because, it's a cutthroat business. It's a dog-eat-dog business, and you want to get your money or your opportunity, or you always think you can do better. But that's not what I was there. They weren't paying me to do that. That wasn't what they were paying me to do. And it took me a couple of years to settle into that. And it's a tough thing because, you make it to the NFL because you think you're better than everybody, because you work so hard and you want to prove it. And then you've got to settle into that role. If you want to make it, you've got to settle into the role. Okay, I'm not starter. I'm not a starter, but can I be the best backup that this team needs me to be? And can I get paid a lot to do it?
How much communication would you have during, let's say, on the sidelines game day? Say your coordinator is on the field, he's not up in the booth. Are you talking to him like the play caller a lot? Why the offense is out there? Is he trying to bounce ideas off you? And then after that, when the offense comes off the field, and we always see on the TV copy, the starter sits down the bench, and now they look at their Microsoft Surface tablets or whatever instead of the printouts, which is the weirdest thing too, that I know Microsoft paid a bunch of money to have those tablets on the sidelines, but everyone gets their playbooks on an iPad. That's the difference.
Yeah, right.
Why aren't our playbooks on this Microsoft Surface situation? I don't get it. It's a weird.
Yeah, and I still like the papers because the Surface, it wasn't that different. I mean, I know what's happening. I could look at this picture and then the next picture and understand what happened. So I think it's a little bit too much in detail. Yeah, I think, for that question, it's really dependent on who the coordinator is and then who the backup is. If you're a coordinator, I'm trying to think of a guy who's calling plays as a coordinator. Let's say, you're the Saints and you're Carmichael's calling the plays. Sean Payton's not calling the plays of the game, and you're Carmichael. Well, you're probably not taking a great deal of input from whoever their backup may be. If it's a young guy like Garrett Grayson, I know is there for a little bit. What is he going to bring that much value to what you're seeing over what Drew Brees and you were seeing? But then if you're a coordinator who, a young coordinator who's, Matt LaFleur down in Tennessee this year, who's going to be a first-time play caller, and I've told Matt this, and I've known him for a while, he better get a veteran down there because he's going to have so much coming at him that he's going to need those set of eyes to go, hey, Matt, on first down, I think you can get a keeper going back towards the left side or, your open side. So it really depends on the coordinator, how he views the backup. If he trusts the backup eyes. My last few years in Detroit, I was fortunate. Jim Bob Cooter really trusted my eyes and what I saw. And the same thing with the quarterback. If you're the starter, that's, again, one of those reasons why guys like me can play a long time. It's not because we're super good. It's because we have those abilities to have those relationships with the starters, and the starters trust us because it's just more eyes on the field.
Did you ever come up with an incident on the sidelines where you and the starter may have not agreed on what he saw? Like, say he came off the field and threw a pick, and you try to let him know what you saw, and he doesn't believe you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, you better be delicate because, depending on that starter, you can get a flight home Monday real fast. But, yeah, I think you got to pick and choose. I mean, it's such a chaotic, high-paced, emotion-driven game, and especially on game days. So you have to pick and choose your battles. It's a lot like marriage, and okay, do I really want to say this to him? Is this information worth me sharing with him? Is it going to help him? So it really was like, if he can benefit from it, if it was good, not like, hey, dude, how did you not see that? But yeah, I think you got fooled because of this. Maybe we can, take a peek on it on the pictures and confirm it or not. But a lot of times for me, it was just spinning, try to spin positivity, try to spin the mindset, not on you or next play or, I think we just got fooled on it or whatnot. I was always trying to spin it positively because, it's such your mind can go negative so quickly.
You got to keep their for a quarterback. Would you say confidence is one of the greatest character traits that they need to have?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you're confident in your ability and the play call and the guys that you're with, you're a better player than you actually are. If that makes sense. Like I've seen it. When I was in Houston with Matt Schaub, he was rolling. There was a 3-year stretch where he was flat out rolling. And I totally believe it was because he was super confident in himself, super confident in the play call from Gary Kubiak and then the players around him. And he became a better player than he, quote unquote, should have been, talent wise. And so, and I've seen it where, the vice versa aspect where a quarterback just goes out there and he's struggling, or the play call comes in and he goes, nah, that play sucks. Or, okay, who do you want me to throw? It's man to man. Okay, who do you want me to throw to, coach? Because I got nobody to throw to. And so but it's a real mind game because you can't really fool yourself either. You can't. I've been out there on the field with guys that I knew weren't good in man-to-man situations. And it's hard to sit there on 3rd and 6 and go, well, I know I'm getting man. I just don't know who I can trust to win. There's confidence is a very real thing.
What do you do if you're a QB and you have confidence in yourself and your arm and what you can do, but you just don't have a competent play caller and he's consistently making missteps and when he's just basically guessing, looking at his chart, okay, 3rd and 5, here we go. I'm going to call this.
Yeah, dude, I've watched it, man. It's difficult to watch. It's as a quarterback, there's a part of you that goes, I just got to be the good soldier because he's the coach and he's calling the plays. And, part of your job is to make sure that everyone else believes in that play. When you step into that huddle and call that play, you want everyone to kind of follow suit for you. But I also know it's very real when you're hearing it game after game after game and your thoughts are backed up by the results. And it's hard for guys to buy into that and then for the results to be what they are when you go, I know I'm better than this. I know we're better than this. I know if I know the play call, if I can predict the play call or whatnot, then the defense can too. So as a quarterback, it depends on your clout, but at some point you got to put your foot down. And a perfect example was, when I was in Detroit, it was 2014 was my first year back there. We brought in a guy named Joe Lombardi from the Saints to be our coordinator. Really good football coach and understands football. But as a play caller with Matthew Stafford, it just wasn't working. And so I could tell we went through the 14th season. We made the playoffs, but we made the playoffs because some very timely wins by Stafford. And then, remember, we played you guys. And then, our defense was really good. And so we get like 6 or 7 games into the 15 season, and it just is not going well. And in conversation with Matthew, I could tell he's frustrated, and it was just kind of a rubber meets the road. This is where we got to make a choice type thing. And I just remember having conversations with Matthew, and he was just so mentally frustrated that, okay, what's got to happen here? And then there was just, thankfully for Matthew's case, the Lions made a decision to kind of make a change, and it was like this breath of fresh air, with Jim Bob Cooter coming in, because Jim Bob Cooter just is a better play caller than Joe Lombardi was. Not that he's a better coach, not that Joe's a bad one. It just fit better.
What is it with play callers? For offensive play callers, I think is the most important position on an NFL roster. You can see when you watch a guy. I know you spent some time with the LA Rams too. I'm going to get to that. I want to ask about McVay and how he did that. But a guy like, I always point to Josh McDaniels. I think that guy is so important. And I've been on defenses where they just they put on a show. They'd run a clinic against us of how to attack our defense. And I feel like that position is so important. Like, what separates those guys you think that are the great play callers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a couple things. Like, one, you have to have a great understanding of your personnel on offense. And so many times, even in the NFL, so many times coaches ask players to do things that they're just incapable of. It's not that they're bad players. They're just incapable of doing the things that those coaches are at. Even in the NFL, I've seen it, and it blows my mind. So that's the first thing. Second of all, you have to have a great understanding of what the defense is doing and how to attack it. I mean, there's something to be said to go, we are who we are, and we're going to make the play call that we want, and we're going to run our stuff. But there's also something to be said to go, well, we know what you're doing, so we're going to attack you, and we're going to go after you. And so I think that those great coaches have that offensive mindset, And then the third thing is you have to have incredible preparation and feel, and you've got to have the courage to trust your gut. So many play callers, I think, go into games with, okay, this is my plan. And I've been on sidelines to go, hey, guys, if we've got this play in our playbook, we need to call this. And our coaches will be like, but we haven't practiced it in 4 weeks. And I'm like, who cares? Let's talk about it on sidelines and call it. And so I think that, you have to have the courage to trust your gut, because sometimes your gut's going to be wrong. But more often than not, if you've got great feel, it'll be right. And you've got to have the courage to go, well, I was prepared for this, but I really want to get to that.
Yeah, I think the great play callers, they take what the defense gives them. And that's what I see. They don't let – I feel like the offensive play calling especially, they don't let emotion get in the way of the plays they're going to call. And a prime example, just a little – if a team is stacking the box, 7 or 8-man box, and you continue to try to run the ball because you feel like you're a physical team and we can run these guys, we can run – I'm like, yeah, well, I don't care who is back there. It doesn't matter. We can't run the ball. Take what they give us. We have one-on-ones everywhere we look. What are we doing?
Yeah, I always say, like, it's just coaches getting out of their own way, and I think, the perfect example was the Super Bowl this year, when you've got, what's going on in that game, and coaches trusting in their players, obviously being aggressive and taking what New England was giving to them, Philadelphia offensively. But, the perfect example is the 4th and goal, Philly special play, when you've got, everyone's seen the clip where Foles comes over to Peterson and is like, hey, Philly, and Peterson doesn't blink. I mean, I'm sure you have too, where, I've recommended plays and coaches again would be like, there's just this hesitancy in players, we feel that. And I just think Doug Peterson not blinking, it was like such this confidence boost to the Foles. And I've talked about it, you talked about it too, is you're walking into that huddle and going, okay, this is going to work. Guys know that. They feel that. So I think that's such a big aspect when it comes to play calling.
Yeah, that's just you put up these awesome videos. Now, do you do it on Periscope? What do you do it on? Like, how do you post them now?
I just post. Well, most of it I just post flat out on my Twitter. Just on as a normal tweet. I either when the season was going on, I was doing live games. And I'd be watching games, and if something cool happened, I'd break it down. And as the season went on, I started to do more on like the NFL Game Pass at All 22 and whatnot. And I've started to do the free agent quarterbacks, and here in the next week or two, I'll do some of the kids coming out into the draft. But I just post it on my Twitter and let it kind of go from there. Some kind of hit real big, and some kind of just gain a little bit of traction. It just depends on who sees it, who's into it, whatnot. And it's for like you talking about Josh McDaniels. I put one up of Josh McDaniels. They look like Star Wars against the Titans this year in the playoffs, just because this. It's so cool to me when coaches can think of stuff like that. For me, we always hear coaches putting players in positions to be successful, and you can tell who coaches who can and who can't.
Yeah. Very, very easy. It seems like that's why I love your videos. You pause it. What do? You set your phone up behind your computer monitor. Is that what you do?
Yeah, I had a buddy of mine. AJ, legit. I started just holding my phone to like my television or computer, like it was 2001. Like super archaic. And then I had a buddy who went to school with me, who was just sent me a tweet. He was like, "Hey, expect something in the mail," and it was like this mini tripod. And so I hook it up to this mini tripod, shoot it on the computer screen, and so then I had my hands, kind of point things out to people. It's been really cool, to be honest with you, man. Just breaking stuff down because I learned a lot about myself. You learn a lot about your eyes and how special your eyes are, how your eyes have become of all those reps as a backup, and your brain and whatnot. And then again, you realize all those years as a backup has prepared you in a way for this world because you learn so many different ways to break stuff down and communicate it to people.
Oh, it's awesome. I love it. I mean, I learned a lot watching how you break down. You'll pause it. You did one on the Patriots. I know their jet sweep screen. They fake jet sweep screen.
Yeah,
and they ran.
Yeah.
Sick. And you're talking about numbers game. And when you watch it, oh, yeah, it seems so simple. But they were able to do that because they ran the jet sweep earlier in the game, and they learned that we can get numbers on this, so they just set it up. They obviously probably came to the sidelines after the jet sweep and said, okay, we're going to be good. We're going to run that screen off of that here shortly, and Rex Burkhead's going to go for 50 or whatever it is.
Yeah, and a big reason for it, too, is like, fans are such a big, important part of the game, and the more you know, the more you love it. But, and I know the Patriots is this example, but I've posted some stuff on the Lions, or I posted some stuff on Alex Smith. And I want people to know, like, there's other good players, especially at the quarterback position, besides Rodgers and Brady. There's other good players. You don't have to be the greatest of all time to be good. Not everyone sucks besides, those two or three guys. Yeah. And the same thing on the defensive side. I don't want the fans to go, man, for the Titans, our defense just sucks. No, it was just a really good play by the Patriots. There's not much you could have done, so it's an appreciation for those plays and those coaches and those players, but also a little bit of like, just because it wasn't a 10-yard loss doesn't mean your defense is the worst ever. And sometimes, the other team does a good job too. So a little bit of that stuff, people just truly getting an understanding and appreciation of all that goes into it.
Do you want to, are you breaking into the broadcasting world? Do you want to do games on TV? What do you want to do with that?
Yeah, that's what I want to do. I've always entertained, as you get older and back into your career, okay, when's it going to end? You start going, okay, am I going to go into this or that? I've always thought about television and media. And it's weird it's funny because as a player, I wasn't really into the media that much. It wasn't, I don't think it was this purposeful act. I was getting paid to play. And so all my focus was as a player. I just, that was for me. I had to, because I wasn't good enough to, have my hand in another little thing, different thing, because I was getting paid for that. And so I want to get into it. It's fun for me. I think that there's a need for it. I think there's a need for people who really understand the game and can communicate the game to the fans. I love football, so I'm a fan at heart as well. So I that's going to be what I want to get into, and I know it's a unique world. I don't ever want to be the person who bashes somebody, but I do think that all those years of being a backup in my eyes and my brain, getting trained, it really kind of transitions well into that world.
What about coaching?
Like I'll always want to coach. I'll always want to coach. Always. That'll always be in me. But I just know what that life looks like, and I truly enjoy being a husband and a dad. So, and not like I understand that that's not impossible, and guys do it. But for every one guy that does that great situation where, man, you get to stay in a city for 8 or 10 years and you've got a relatively healty life. There's 9 guys who move 4 times in 7 years and bing, bang, boom. And I did that enough as a player. I don't necessarily want to do it right now as when my kids are kind of in that really unique stage of under 12 and developing into some cool stuff. So I want to get into TV more than coaching.
When you watch some things on TV, I guess, are you ever surprised at how little some commentators know?
Yeah, I am, to be honest with you. Like part of me is like, no, because, part of me goes no because they shouldn't know. They shouldn't know as much as me, and they shouldn't know as much as you because they don't have the education and experience. But at the same time, I get surprised by it because, I mean, you're on television and you should, I mean, that's your job. You should do it as good as you can. And like for me right now, and I'm not in that world yet. And I just don't understand how people can just steal stuff from other people and just say it, you know, like, oh, I heard this, so it sounds cool. You know, like I'd rather be opinionated and use evidence and be wrong than just say, oof, you know, I really like Josh Rosen because he's accurate. Because I don't like Josh Rosen because I hear he's not a good teammate. Like I think that's so corny to me. Or like when I watch games, you know, my Twitter video started with Cam. The Panthers were playing either a Sunday night or a Monday night game. I think it was Sunday night against the Dolphins. Later on in the game, and the Dolphins all out, zero blitz Cam, and he kind of uses a dummy cadence, gathers the information, sees that they're going to all out him, and he checks to like a quick wide receiver screen. All of a sudden, 40 yards later, it's a touchdown. And I'm listening to it, and no one's talking about it. No one's talking about how Cam saw it, why Cam saw it, how he got to the check. It was just like, man, what a really cool play. And I'm like, for me, I'm tired of having to listen to what happened. I want to know why it happened. And I want to be, I think people need to know whys and hows more than what.
Yeah, so when you like that play that you talk about as a quarterback, when he used the dummy cadence, puts his hands up, he sees they're bringing a zero blitz. As a quarterback, how can you decipher between they just showed a zero blitz, or are they faking? They're all trying to show and show a zero blitz and back out.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is your preparation during the week and your film study, and you find a guy. I mean, you know, there's always a guy on defense that'll give it away, especially with the dummy cadence. And when you're at home and you can use cadence. So you find a guy or, two on film during the week that'll give it away. You know the situation. And then you have to trust your preparation. And for me, like that play, I was just like, listen, it's a math game. And there was, I cut the center in half. There was 4 guys on the left and 5 guys on the right. So Cam knows where it's coming from. He sees that the corners are all kind of off at 8 yards. Well, my preparation, my educated guess is you're bringing 0. I'm going to check to this. And so that's part of it, is just understanding what to look for in the game, finding the person to go after or figure out who's your tell and go from there.
So what about – I know you were in camp last year with the Rams, right?
Yeah.
How did Sean McVay come in and in the first year make them look like a different team and make Jared Goff look like a different quarterback?
Yeah, I think there's 3 things. And I with units in the NFL, whether offensive or defensive units, I think there's 3 things that make you good. One, you got to have a good scheme. And that's a good scheme. That Mike Shanahan, Gary Kubiak scheme is really good. Kyle Shanahan's scheme is really good. 2, they've got good players. I mean, Gurley, Sammy Watkins, Higbee, their offensive line is so underrated. Robert Woods was a huge pickup for them. Cooper Kupp, so they got good players. Goff had a good year. And then 3, they've got a great play caller. So I think those 3 variables help an offense or a unit be really good. The second thing is he had just this way about him where it felt like he was the 54th guy on the team. And I was only there for 6 weeks, but it was obvious to me, like, guys just loved him. And it wasn't maybe the age helped, and it wasn't this, oh, he's our buddy thing. It's just like it felt like it was that I've had coaches where it was like, well, I'm the coach and you're beneath me. And it seemed like Sean was like, I'm the coach and you guys are with me. And it seemed like there was 54 guys on the team. It wasn't, they still respected and revered him as the head coach, but it just seemed like he was one of the guys. It was the we thing. And then I think the third thing was that dude is bright, man. He's brilliant. I mean, I was 3 minutes into my first offensive meeting there, and I had spoken with Sean on the phone multiple times before. And I just remember looking 3 minutes into an offensive meeting, looking over to Jared Goff and being like, dude, you have no idea how lucky you are. No idea, because this could be somebody else and you just wouldn't have the success you're going to have. So he is bright. He's one of the coaches. I can't name them all because there's not a lot, but he's one of the few coaches that knows offensive and defensive football as well as anybody in the NFL.
Did he coach on the defensive side of the ball?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think he's always been an offensive side, but I just think he was one of those guys that was around good defensive coaches and decided to go learn defensive football from them.
Did you guys ever do that, like cross-train to where they started doing that in Green Bay towards the end of my time, where usually in the spring we'd have like these cross-training deals. So like linebackers, we'd go meet with the running backs coach, and we would watch film together, and then we get to talk to him and say, okay, what's really tough for you guys as a running back? Well, like on third down, we're trying to keep you in, and you have blitz pickup, but you're going to get out if we're not blitzing. And like, what makes it tough for a line or a fullback to block us? Like, what do you guys hate? Did you ever do that? Like, where you cross train with other positions?
No, I've never been a part of that. I think it's really smart. I think that's the caveat for me would be I wouldn't want to divulge too much information because how transient a world it is. You don't want to divulge too much information because more likely than not, you're going to have to play against one of those players at some point. But I've never done that, but it's really smart. And the more educated your team is, especially with the flaws of what they're going to see, is better. But I have never been a part of that now.
It's really, I really enjoyed the couple times we did it. And you're right, there's a weird line though, because guys are in and out of that locker room so much that you could be playing against them the next week. Yeah,
dude, I've been on teams where we would bring like a practice squad receiver and not even give him a playbook. He wouldn't even get a playbook because you don't know how long he's going to be around. And it's not fair to the kid, and it's the nastiness of the NFL in some ways, but I've been a part of it, man.
Wow. So you're 6 weeks in LA. Was there a legitimate chance to make that team?
Yeah. So like for me, going into last season, the spring, I was kind of like, do I want to play? Do I not want to play? Because I really wanted to go back to Detroit. That was where my heart was. I loved my time there with Coach Caldwell, and Matthew and I had a great relationship. And when they called me in February of last year and said, hey, we're not going to bring you back, I was like, I think I'm going to be done, because I always said I was a guy who loved the grind. So many of us were. And I said once I fell, out of love with the grind, I wanted to be done. And so they called me really in like June. And I knew Sean McVay a little bit. I know the offensive coordinator there, Matt LaFleur, from my time in Houston. Him and I stayed in touch. And then I knew the quarterback coach, Greg Olson, recruited me at Purdue. He was my rookie year quarterback coach. And so Olson and Matt LaFleur called me and were like, are you going to play this year? And I was like, I don't know. And they were like, listen, we're super young at the quarterback position. They had Goff, who was going into his second year, and Sean Mannion going into his third year. And they were like, would you come and just mentor and be our third stringer? And I was like, are you guys going to keep 3? And they were like, yeah, we're definitely going to keep 3. And what we're going to do is you're not going to take any reps in training camp. Those guys need all the reps. We literally want you to come and mentor. We'll cut you after preseason, bring you back after week 1 to give us roster flexibility throughout the year. And I was like, guys, listen, it's all the way across the country. I'm not coming out there if that's not going to be the case. Like, I'll come do it, and I'll be that for you, but I'm not going to, get kind of screwed over in a way. Long story short, go through preseason, don't do anything, and then cuts happen. I'm in cuts for 50 minutes with the head coach and the general manager after the preseason, talking about how we're going to go throughout the season, all that stuff. And then 2 days later, they picked up a guy, a young kid, third stringer. It went over kind of crappy. It is what it is. It's the NFL. I thought I would be there. I wasn't there. I did kind of some consulting for them a little bit. Was going to entertain getting on their coaching staff, but I needed that break. I needed that severance from the NFL as a player,
What does that mean, you did some consulting for them?
I just helped Jared a little bit, like in preparation and some study. And, Jared was really bright, but he was so young. And you could tell he needed help on how to study film, how to go through his preparation during the week, how to plan, okay, on Monday I watch this film, on Tuesday I watch this film, on Wednesday I watch this film. And so, it was just kind of sharing some of the experiences that I had of helping him kind of prepare for games.
Can you think of any of your some of your favorite teammates you played with over your time?
Oh, man, yeah. So early on in my career, I loved Jeff Garcia just because he was so competitive. There was a guy who played for, I think, 12, 13 years in the NFL who shouldn't have played at all, truthfully. He was just, physically looking at him. So I loved him. I loved Sean Rogers. If you remember Big Baby, Sean Rogers, defensive tackle from Texas. He was a blast to be around, man. Then I went to Houston. Some of my lifelong friends, Matt Schaub and Chris Myers and Kevin Walter, some of those guys were my all-time buddies just because the work ethic that they brought to work every day. We go on golf trips every year together. Indy, I loved guys like Jeff Saturday, and Peyton was obviously like a starstruck experience for myself. I went to Tampa. Vincent Jackson was a guy that I really respected. Him and I played in the Senior Bowl together. And, but my last couple of years in Detroit were really special. I mean, Matthew and I grew to have a great friendship and respect for each other. Don Muehlbach, who's the Lions long snapper, who's been there forever, who's a worse athlete than my 2-year-old daughter, but playing 27 years in the NFL, is a good buddy. So I've been fortunate. I've made some really, really good friends. Calvin is a guy that for some reason somehow is a good buddy, but says 9 words a year. So, I was fortunate to have some good friends, man.
And speaking of Calvin Johnson, how rare is that for a guy to be an absolute superstar at the receiver position and be a quiet guy?
Dude, that's the thing that I respect and loved about Calvin the most. Was Calvin was in my experience, was one of the few guys in the NFL that could have been great without doing anything, without working, could have been rude, could have been a jerk, standoffish, whatever, because he was that good. But he worked like he was an undrafted free agent trying to make the team. Treated everybody that way. Like the undrafted kids got to do everything right. Be respectful to everybody. If they want to make the team, you got to say hello to everybody and clean up the plate. That was Calvin. And somehow he had that combination of incredible talent and skill and this combination of selflessness and work ethic and humility and whatnot kind of bundled into one. And that's what was his most endearing quality, is just watching him be that.
Now, what kind of impact does that have on not only that receiver room, but that whole locker room when your absolute star, one of the best in the NFL, is that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a unique thing to come across. I mean, it's so unique to have that in the NFL. It made you just legit, and I don't throw this word around, it made you love him. It just made you love him and appreciate him, because if Calvin was willing to do it, how could you not? If he was the one guy on your team that could slack off or, make people do this for him or be entitled, it was Calvin, and he didn't do it, well, then you can't either. And I know it didn't translate into, organizational wins or, championships for the Lions, but I do believe that Calvin had a lasting impact on every individual in that organization, player and coach and front office wise and support staff wise in that time and in the future, because I know, it still resonates with me. No matter how good he was, it was important for him to stay the same. And I think that is such a unique quality that it's endearing.
I think it's gigantic, and especially the receiver position. We know that's a position that guys love to be outspoken, get super pissed if they don't get the ball. I actually heard Jeff Garcia on a podcast a while back, and they were asking about T.O., and he's like, you just never really knew what you were going to get with T.O. Which guy you were going to get. He said he always worked hard in practice, but he said there'd be games where he'd catch 2 balls and we would win, and he'd mope around the locker room afterwards, and then there's games where he caught 10 for 120 and we lost, and he would act like we won. So
yeah, it really is. At that position, it's so – and as a quarterback, it's so refreshing. Reggie Wayne was like this a little bit for me. Like Reggie – I was on 2 bad teams. I was obviously on the 0-16 Detroit team with Calvin, and then I was on an 0-11 team with Reggie and Indy. And they were the same. Those guys just kept working and kept, Reggie would always walk by my locker and go, just throw left, just throw left. And even if I didn't, he would always walk by my locker and say, just throw left. And it was like, you still got to see them work. You still got to see them be professionals and work at their craft. And it's such like I said, it's so unique that you gravitate towards it.
Yeah, I think it has such an impact on the other guys in that receiver room. You could have drafted a guy in the first round who was kind of teetering on which way to go, but if he sees their star receiver guy who's been there for a long time carrying himself that way, that may change the course of that young kid's career.
No, absolutely. I mean, and that's why you want to have people like that on your team. That people like that. And even if it's a guy that isn't the most talented but is productive, if he has those qualities, you want those guys in your locker room, because those young kids are always coming in looking for someone to follow. And you hear coaches all the time, find a veteran and do what he does. And I think that's it's a unique thing in the NFL.
So you spent one season with the Colts?
Yeah, 2011.
And that was that the year that Peyton went on IR and was hurt the whole year?
Yeah. Yep.
Was he around?
A little bit, a little bit here and there, especially early on, he was around a little bit more, and then he had a big chunk of time kind of, second and third quarter of the season, so say like October, November world, where he was kind of, subdued and going through the surgery and going through some rehab that he was kind of pulled back a little bit. And then he came around a little bit more at the end of the season, but just be able to watch him work and handle himself was such a learning experience. And, dude, he would run walkthroughs like they were, you were in the middle of World War II. I mean, walkthroughs were so intense, except for when the ball was snapped. Like, he'd be in the huddle, call the play, and he would get to line of scrimmage, and it was like he was playing, at New England, screaming and yelling, soaking wet in sweat. We were inside and 30 degrees out. I mean, it was just really impressive to watch him operate, and he set the tempo for that whole organization, man. It was incredible.
Wow, so he was that intense in everything surrounding the game. How did he – I'm sure he held guys accountable for what they did. What was his balance like between not just being too overbearing, or how would a young kid handle that?
Oh, I do think he was overbearing, but in a good way. I mean, the standard was so high and it was set so early, I'm sure, in his career that you had no choice. You either were going to follow suit or you were gone. And you got almost intimidated into, getting your act together by that guy. Now, it's different coming from a player than it does from a coach. I mean, you have Peyton Manning, again, it's like Calvin. Peyton Manning's doing it. Well, if it's working for him, I'm going to try it, So, I think that he was absolutely the pulse setter for the organization, man.
And how did you feel then when you're trying to come in there and you run your first walkthrough with the Colts? How do you handle it? Do you try to just be Peyton Jr.?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was still only in my 6th year or something, maybe like that. So I was just, again, and I was still young, hadn't played a ton, and I was trying to learn. So when I had the chance to go run the walkthroughs, I was just like, well, I'm going to give it a try too. And it worked. It worked, man. You got better as a player, and you got your players better. And so that was one of the things that I took, when I went to Tampa and I shared it with a guy like Mike Glennon, who had a lot of success as a rookie when I was down there with him, or when I went back to Detroit. That was one of the things I brought with Matthew. And Matthew was a little bit like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, he was still, and I think his 6th or 7th year had some success in the NFL. And that was one of those things you had to kind of weave in and sew into him. It was like, listen, dude, I know this is weird and it's awkward to stand out there and, hey, Calvin, get your split right, but something that Matthew over time adapted and it kind of elevated all of his game.
Yeah, I'm sure each guy has to. Everyone's a different personality and how they carry them, so everyone can't be Peyton, but they can be in their own way. They can hold guys accountable in their own way, and when it comes from the quarterback, that's every team. Mike McCarthy in Green Bay used to always tell. He's like, "This is your team. This isn't my team. You guys take ownership of what you do. Like, I'm here," and we knew he was the boss, but he wanted players to run the show, and that's, I think, all the best teams do it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes from your quarterback, like, especially, I could say this, Matthew Detroit's not a guy who loves conflict. And so when you can be a little bit of out of your comfort zone and kind of present that a little bit of like, okay, fellas, like, we got, like, unless we want to stink, we got to get this right. I think that, like you said, the ownership is such a big part. I don't know if you saw the Steve Kerr thing like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think they were playing the Suns, and Kerr, they were struggling, the Warriors, bored or whatever, and he just kind of gives his players the dry erase board and said, well, you guys draw it up. I thought that was super cool because it's along those lines of like, all right, well, how can we kind of do this ourselves even more?
I think Steve Kerr's awesome, by the way. I think he's a great coach for me.
He seems like so much fun, man.
Oh, and he gets it. And even after the game, I remember that game you talked about because he was so funny. They show like Draymond Green's running the huddle, and then the next timeout, another guy's drawing up plays, and Steve's just standing off to the side, kind of looking around the arena. And afterwards, they're talking about, oh, was this disrespectful to the other team? First off, that's the dumbest question ever. I've always said, if you're disrespected, then beat us. Don't let us pound you into the ground. It's like when you come and Baker Mayfield planted the flag in the 50-yard line at Ohio State this year when he beat him. I'm like, sure, you can debate whether that's disrespectful if you should have or not, but he came in here and killed you guys. If someone beat us, they're free to do whatever they want. Yeah,
for sure. And, like, my thing, too, is, like, you got to know people. I mean, Steve Kerr, I don't know him, but he doesn't seem like a disrespectful dude to me. So it's not like he's all of a sudden going to flip the switch and go, you know what, I feel like being a jerk right now and let's do something disrespectful. He's got his right and his job is to do that. And I agree with the Baker Mayfield thing. Like, and sports is emotional. Like, things happen in emotional moments. And I loved it. I'm sure, you being, a Ohio State guy didn't, but I thought it was great for sports. I thought it was great for college football. I thought it was great for the Oklahoma kids,
Yeah, I was watching I actually was at the game, like, for pregame, did some stuff, and then I went home and watched it, and I watched him come out with the flag, and I was like, oh, man, this sucks. I'm like, that'd be brutal. Your coaches aren't going to be happy, but what are we going to do, go fight them for planting a flag after we just got beat by 25 points? Like, you can't – it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and as a player, you use that stuff, right? Like, I'm sure those Ohio State kids are going to take that personal, and they'll use it, and their coaches will remind them of it and whatnot. That's one of the beauties of sport is it is very much an emotional you versus me thing and us versus you. And that's what I love about it. It's competition.
Yeah, it really is, man. I'm going to wrap this up and let you get back to your, we have triplets and then one younger. Is that right?
Yeah, we have 6-year-old triplet boys, and then we have a 2-year-old daughter. And so we have a busy home. We actually last night just got back from Disney World. You can imagine what that's like with that crew. So yeah, we got a busy house, man.
Man, so your 6-year-old boys, though, they obviously are they fans of a certain team that you played for?
They used to be huge Lions fans. I mean, and they weren't old enough to really understand it, but yeah, Daddy, plays football. And then it's funny, if someone asks, why doesn't your daddy play football anymore? My sons will go, well, his coach told him it wasn't good enough. Which I'm like, he's got it true. And then, now we live in Philadelphia. My wife is from Philadelphia. Her whole family's from Philadelphia. And obviously the run that they just went on. If I hear one more EAGLES Eagles chant, Child Protective Services is getting called, man. So. Oh, man.
From your kid, yeah, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and she asked me one day, I wasn't offended. I was surprised at how smart she is. She's like, Dad, so you don't play football anymore because they bring in, like, younger guys that are better and faster? I was like, yeah, pretty much. That's how it works. Yeah, and cheaper. That's how it works.
That's basically how my kids see it too. I mean, and it's the truth, like it's one of the things where you sit back and you laugh at it and go, you know what? Yeah, you're spot on.
You got it. Yeah, you're very perceptive. Somehow you've come up with that. But yeah, it's fun, man. My kids like to ask, like, Dad, you're like the only dad that's at pickup and drop off all the time. I'm like, yeah, you're damn right I am. You better remember that when you're old too.
Dude, do you remember Chris Myers played center for Houston for a long time? So he lives like 5 minutes from me up here. His wife is from up here as well. And so we're good buddies. We played together in Houston. And I was over his house last week, and I forget how the conversation got going, but somebody asked his daughter, what does your daddy do? And she was like, he just kind of hangs out at the house all day and plays with us. And it was like Chris looked at her and was like, you make it sound like I'm a deadbeat or something, like, And Chris was like, you know what, McKenna, you're right. I do. I'm at home with you guys. And it was just, I tell my wife all the time, like, if I go and do something for like a day or two, if I have to go away for a day or two, my kids are like, you're not going to be here tomorrow. And I'm like, you guys have no idea right now. Like, mommies and daddies aren't home all day like mommy and daddy are. Like, my son would be like, you never play with us. And I'd be like, I've been home for 16 months playing every day, bud. Like, that's people's lifetimes.
Oh, it's so true, man, because I do a lot of work on Sirius. During the season, I did games for FS1, so I would take little 2 or 3 day trips at a time, but I do everything from my house. And I do radio from here and this podcast. And so they're like, oh, Dad, you got another podcast tonight? I'm like, yeah, I schedule it for after you go to bed. I tell people I can do it at 8:30 p.m. Like, what are you talking? I tuck you in and read you 14 books. You don't understand. You need to go live with someone else where they have a 9 to 5.
Yeah, no concept. And my kids would be like, well, can you play right now? And I'll be like, I can't. And they'll be like, oh. And I'll be like, go. One, you have 27 siblings in this house. Go play with one of them and go. You know, they just have no idea right now, man, where it's like, and sometimes I look at my wife and I'd be like, I've got to get a job strictly so my kids don't think like the dad's just home all day, every day. They have no concept of that.
Oh yeah. The stories that they tell their teachers of what their dad, like what dads do when they get done playing has got to be amazing. I can't imagine.
It's unreal, man.
The stuff my daughter tells. Well, my dad, when I go to bed, he usually goes in the basement and smokes cigars and hangs out by himself and watches stuff. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I need some alone time.
But your teachers are probably like, man, what a loser.
This guy, you better get him on suicide watch. We see all these ex-players hurt themselves.
You should go get a job.
Exactly. The weird schedule really throws them off when it's nothing, when it's not a normal consistent gig. But Dan, appreciate you, man. Where do people I'll be watching all your videos. What's your name on Twitter for people to check you out?
It's at Dan Orlovsky 7, ORLOVSKY and the number 7. So at Dan Orlovsky 7. Bam.
We will link it up too when we post this. But thanks a lot, man. I learn a lot from your videos. I enjoy watching them. I know they take some time, so appreciate it, and we'll talk down the road.
No, I appreciate you having me, man. For a dude who played against you a bunch, watched you play a bunch, it's fun to kind of connect on this world. So
for sure, man. Thanks a lot. Good luck with everything.
Good deal, buddy. You too, man. Thanks, dude.
See ya.
We're glad you could join us for today's conversation. After you subscribe to the show, head over to thehawkcast.com or reach out to AJ directly on Twitter at @officialAJHawk to recommend future guests that will help us inspire people to keep talking. Thanks again, and we look forward to speaking with you next time on the HawkCast.